Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Empower LEP podcast. I'm your host, Jana Parker, licensed educational psychologist, group practice owner and mentor at Empower LEP. Today, I host Dr. James Bylund, an LEP with a group practice in the East Bay area called the Bylund Clinic. James and I talk about his journey into clinical psychology, school psychology, and private practice. We talk about the amazingness of private practice as well as the challenges of being a business owner. James has an inspiring and invigorating story and is continuing to develop his practice with LEPs and with allied professionals. As always, I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Welcome back to the Empower LEP podcast. I am here with Dr. James Bylund. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Janet. Thanks for inviting me on.
Absolutely. So I'm really interested to hear first about your practice, what you are doing, where you are doing it, what is it called?
Yeah, so the owner and clinical director of the Bylund Clinic. Our primary office is in Walnut Creek, but we also have an office in Lafayette and an office in Brentwood. Mostly big portion of our practice is doing IEEs, independent educational evaluations. We also do sort of private neuropsych assessments, psychoeducational evaluations. Over the past year and a half, we've expanded a bit. We have a couple of therapists on staff who see clients for therapy. We've got 2 executive skills coaches, like an academic interventionist. Just recently brought on a behaviorist to do FBA IEs. So we're growing, but still the majority of what we do are private neuropsych assessments and IEs.
Awesome. I have so many questions about your practice, but I kind of want to wait till the next part of the interview and kind of start with your history. But your practice sounds really similar to mine and sounds like it's grown in kind of similar ways, like a multidisciplinary team.
Yeah. I think there's probably a lot of similarities to what you're doing in the South Bay and what we're doing in Contra Costa County.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly started out with myself and doing assessments, but it's always tough to do all these evaluations and make all of these recommendations. I thought would be really helpful, and then kind of send parents off into the abyss to try to find somebody to be able to do all of those things. So over the past couple of years, definitely been trying to kind of close the loop and be able to conduct the evaluation and provide diagnosis where it's needed and recommendations, but then also be able to offer some help for the kids too.
Yeah. Awesome. Keep a little bit of it at least in-house.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's actually another goal over the next year is to really do more, connecting with sort of allied professionals around the Bay Area too, because a lot of times we'll do assessments for families from Sacramento to San Jose, and I don't necessarily know who the service providers are, where they are. I mean, if they happen to live near our Walnut Creek office, fantastic. But it's one thing to come to our office a couple times for an evaluation versus coming every week for a service, and to be able to build those connections with other professionals throughout the Bay Area is definitely a goal for the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I've found that if they've been evaluated in your clinic, they feel usually like comfortable, safe, and like taken care of in your clinic. And so they like to be able to continue on with you.
Yeah.
But then there are also, we don't do everything, or we're not a match for everyone. I have found that connecting with other allied professionals in the area that I'm in has been one of the most beneficial things, both for figuring out where kids could get the support or families could get the support they need after evaluation. But additionally, those clinicians often refer to us as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things that we can talk about today, but I definitely think for LEPs, that marketing piece is huge, and getting that the referral sources established is really critical.
Yeah.
It's a competitive space. It's most of us have a cash only practice, which makes it even more challenging. And when parents get word of mouth referral, they feel that there's a level of trust there, that there's a relationship there that's much more effective than blindly marketing people on paid Google ads.
Yeah. Have you found that it sounds like the cities that you're in are pretty similar, like they're all kind of around the same area. But if you had to expand your network so that, because I always think like, well, if I were going to expand somewhere else, that would be one of the difficulties that I would have, is just not maybe knowing, if I want to go to LA or San Diego or something, I don't
Yeah.
have those same connections there.
Yeah. You have dreams of taking over the world with your,
Right, right.
with your LEP, at least in the state of California, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about it. I shared an office in Sunnyvale for a little bit. I think I jumped the gun on it. I didn't have the infrastructure for it. So, I did get some help from another LEP doing some testing out there, and we do have clients out in that area. But it was very difficult for me to get out there, and still the majority of our like word of mouth referrals were families in our area. One of the things I found too, like for an assessment, I don't know how frequently your clients come in for testing with you. We try to complete it into max 3 testing appointments.
Yeah.
And families are willing to drive for that. And so that was the other piece too, is that like, hey, I've got this office in Sunnyvale, but families in that area are more than willing for the most part to come to Walnut Creek if it's 2 times.
Right.
It's not like they're coming every week. So the office I set up there was for assessments, and it was just kind of like, well, if they're coming here, why am I investing, this time for me to drive all the way up there, for example? The Lafayette office is a therapy office, so it's just set up differently than our Walnut Creek office, and a lot of our therapy clients live really close to that office. And so even though the 2 cities are really close to one another, when it's after school and it's commute traffic and you're sitting in traffic for 30 minutes to get your kid to therapy versus 10 or 15 minutes, that's a big deal. And so that's why we have that office there. The office in Brentwood, my hope is to be able to draw more families from like the Central Valley area. But to be completely honest, I live a mile from this office, and if I can come here and work rather than drive 45 minutes in traffic to Walnut Creek, then like it's just a lot easier for me. I can get out of the house, and I'm not spending hours a day driving. So the Brentwood office is more than anything just out of convenience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay. Yeah, there are so many questions that I have, but I do want to take you back to kind of your training and where you worked and how you then got into private practice.
Yeah. I thought about this, ahead of our call today,
Yeah.
and it's been 14 years, but just so many things have happened in a 14-year time frame that it's really difficult to kind of sequence it all out. Completed my first grad school program at San Diego State. Wonderful program. 4 years, you got a master's degree in EDS, and then I did a year for San Diego Unified. And during that year, I already got the itch that I wanted to get my doctorate. I was like, okay, I've spent all this time in school. Half the people I talk to call me doctor, and I've got to correct them and tell them I'm not a doctor. And and it just was like, okay, I feel like I want to take that next step. So, and at that point, like LEP wasn't even on my radar. Like I was super happy to be a school psychologist. I thought I made it. I completed grad school. This is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. Maybe go into school administration at some point, right? And then when I went back to school, I went to Alliant because they offered like what they call like an advanced standing program. So like I didn't have to start all over again. Other program I looked at, like, okay, you're starting day 1. Like I don't care what you did for the last 4 years at San Diego State. I'm like, well, that sucks because I feel like 120 something units. I'd like to be able to use at least some of those. And so Alliant took them, and then I did that, and that's where I really discovered what an LEP was. Because a lot of the instructors were LEPs, they taught at night, and then they did their LEP thing during the day. And actually, there was even a person in my program whose dad was like the big IEE person in San Diego, and he was I think a school psych first, and then a clinical psych, was a school administrator, was like either a SPED director or SELPA director or something at some point. And just had a lot of connections throughout the county because of that. And then he had this private practice where I think they primarily did neuropsych assessments, and then he contracted LEPs to do all these IEs everywhere. And I was like, okay, this guy's got it dialed in, So I basically was like, I've never met this guy before, but like I just had this image of this person in my mind. I'm like, okay, let's check off the boxes, get the LEP, let's get the doctorate, work towards clinical hours. I ended up doing the same thing too in terms of going to school admin for a while, and did that and built those connections that way. But really, it was this person's dad that I just sort of like had in my mind trying to model what I was doing after. So when I was at Alliant, and he wasn't the only one. I mean, there was other people. There's another person that was a couple of years ahead of me that I actually did know, and watched what they were doing and how they're building their practice and tried to mirror a lot of it, what I was doing off of what they were doing. So this was like 2009, and then in 2010, I'd been to school psych now for 2 years, right? So I could qualify to take the LEP exam. So I took it and passed that. And then I just started trying to build up my private practice. And I just super busy at the time. So I was working full time at San Diego for San Diego Unified. Although school psych jobs a lot easier back then.
Right.
I imagine there's a lot of people listening to this that want to go into private practice because being a school psych is not fun for a lot of people these days.
Right.
But back then it was way more laid back than what people are doing with these days. But I did that. I went to school in the evening. On the weekends, I did testing for a neuropsych up in North County, San Diego, just to get testing experience and private practice experience, and then was trying to build a private practice and then just doing everything on my own, so I was a website designer. I was a marketer, and it was grueling, but, and a lot of late nights, but just trying to get my private practice started. So I did that. Let's see, and then 2011, my oldest son was born. And then my wife and I decided that we were going to move back up to the Bay Area. Now I think about it too. Sorry, there's all these little steps. I was accruing hours for clinical licensure then too.
Yeah, that's a question that I have actually, because I'm trying to envision, how do people, you have your LEP, so you can work in private practice, you can do your own thing, but you also have to be accruing these hours. So how did you?
Oh, for licensure? Yeah. No, there's like two parts to that story, right? So I started doing it in San Diego, and I probably got about 700 of the 3,000 hours to be able to do that. But then when we moved, my wife and I are from the Bay Area, right? So we had our son, we're down in San Diego, we're living in an apartment. We never leave the apartment because we don't know anybody or trust anybody to care for our son, And like, we got to get back near family. And so we moved back up to the Bay Area. And then I took a job as a program specialist. So LEP in 2010, 2011, I think I got my admin credential, so I'm like trying to like think of all these things that this other person had done, so like, let me get the admin credential. So I got that. And then I got a job as a program specialist when I came up here. And then I really just kind of went down the admin route for a while. And your clinical hours expire after 5 years. So the 700 hours that I got in San Diego actually expired. So I ended up having to start all over again. But came up here and again was going the admin route, but the LEP at that point was just like a way to like make extra money, So our oldest son was born. My wife didn't go back to work after that, and now here I am trying to provide for a family on a single income, which is hard to do, in the Bay Area. So I thought, okay, well, I'll do the LEP thing on the weekends and I'll build. So I started over again, basically in the Bay Area, trying to do the same thing, like doing my own website. I didn't have an office, so like, I'd go to people's homes to do assessments. I like could try to spin it because I thought it was this sounds terrible. I'm going to show up at your house and do your assessment. Like, who are you? Like, So I would try to spin it like, oh, it's super convenient. You don't have to go anywhere. Get assessed in your own home. It's less expensive because I don't have all the overhead costs. I was, trying to find all these different ways to sort of sell it when I started out. So I'd work as a program specialist, then eventually a director, and then doing the LEP thing on the weekends. Then let's see.
How are you getting your hours though? Like, were you working?
So I haven't got to that part yet. So
okay.
But that wasn't actually till I went to full-time private practice. So it actually really helped though, and we'll kind of talk about the marketing piece, I suppose, in a little bit. But I was just marketing to doing this online sort of marketing with some success. I'd get an assessment or two, maybe a month. But then when I was working as a program specialist and district director, I discovered that in the Bay Area there was a huge shortage of school psychs. In San Diego that wasn't the case.
Right.
And so I started using the connections I was building as a program specialist and director, because I knew all these directors, and letting them know like, hey, I can, help with those assessments and help keep your district compliant, So So at that point, I started doing that and started bringing on some people to help me out because I did have a job during the day, and I couldn't just be rolling out to schools all the time, and people were wondering, when are you doing your director job?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started bringing on people to help me to do that, and that really did start to help build up the private practice. Eventually I split those things off because of at some point, in my opinion, it's hard to do both, be a school district contractor and then be an independent assessor.
Yeah.
But that did help kind of build up the private practice. And as that was going, then I was looking for ways to get my clinical hours. And there was a lot of starts and stops to doing that. But I eventually found a clinical psych who was also a school psych. I knew the director for the school district, and they knew that I wanted the hours. And we sort of had this agreement that I would come help them with testing as an employee a couple of days a week, rather than a contractor. And then their clinical psych / school psych could sign off on my hours. So I was able to accrue those, working a few days a week for a school district and then doing my private practice the rest of the week.
Oh, okay. So you did some hours in a school district, but under the supervision of a clinical psychologist / school
You have
psychologist.
to be employed by the same agency
Right.
as no, I tried all sorts of arrangements. Like I had a district somewhere else that was going to 1099 contract a supervisor to come in and provide the supervision and sign off on my hours. I mean, I had all these different arrangements where like it looked like it was going to happen and then things would fall apart. And I'd almost given up on it. At a point, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm just never going to get my clinical license. I mean, I was even paying clinical psychs to supervise other LEPs in my practice. They were getting their clinical hours. I'm like, man, this is crazy. Like because I can't employ this person doing the supervision. Like I could hire somebody to supervise someone else, but they couldn't supervise me because you can't pay them for supervision.
Wow. Yeah.
But no, eventually I did it. And then it took 3 years, I think, to complete those hours. And then I sat for the exam, and there's other things you need to do too. But the 3,000 hours is a huge hurdle.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think about that. I go back and forth,
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
it's tricky too. I mean, and if you're just an LEP and all you ever want to do are like assessments, it may not be worth it.
right.
My thinking, and I still don't, to be honest with you, I mean, I don't know like if I've benefited in any major way from having it at this point, but my thinking in doing it was I did want to grow a group practice. And I felt being a clinical psych would be helpful in doing that. Like when we start providing, bringing on therapists, for example, and,
Right.
it's kind of silly that it's the case, but sometimes the titles matter. You don't have to like explain to somebody like that you're an educational psychologist and what the difference between that and a clinical psych is, which is kind of silly, but it's just for for people, for the public coming to you for the service, it may matter some, but
Yeah. Also, I guess, moving to other states if you wanted to do something like that.
Yeah,
Being
they
a
don't have LEPs everywhere.
Yeah, I don't, not many states, but
Yeah.
well, that's awesome. I'm glad that you did that, and it's nice to just kind of understand how that went for you.
Hopefully
That it
it wasn't all too
wasn't.
confusing for everybody listening. I like
No, I
confused
get it.
myself trying to like go through the sequence of things because
Yeah,
there's so many little steps along the way. But
yeah. So, okay, so you kind of did that while you were like, so then you were still doing some work in the schools, and then, okay, so then what happened?
yeah, yeah, the private practice thing was sort of like evolved a little bit itself. Like I said, at first it was the just serving like a truly like independent assessor without any connection to school districts. And then the school district stuff started to really grow. At which point I actually formed a non-public agency because I thought, okay, maybe this is the route that we go. And the non-public agency actually grew quite a bit. Like we brought on school psychs and contracted with districts and sent school psychs out to districts. And that was actually, I would say 80% of my business for a long time was just doing that. I had maybe one person that helped me with testing in my office, and then everybody else was going out to schools. But then it did get to the point, and I think that's what a lot of my sort of sense is that like that's what a lot of LEPs are doing to kind of get off the ground. There's a shortage of school districts. You can get these contracts. You can leave your district, and maybe you can go back and contract with that district. And people are doing that to get their practice started. And I certainly did that, and it was very helpful in getting the practice started. It did get to the point though that um, the relationship with the school district and relationships with parents did start to conflict. And I think that's something that people need to be really mindful of, when they do that, especially as your practice grows. Um, it should be that we can just go in and focus on the kid. And I believe that that's what we do, right? Like we go in and focus 100% on the kid. But the nature of the relationship between parents and districts these days, not everybody sees that the same way. And so, if you're going out and contracting with a district and doing their district assessments, and then you turn around and get an IEE referral, I do think it can become complicated whether or not you can really focus on that kid and advocate in their best interest, when a significant part of your monthly paycheck comes from that district. I think it's and I do think it blurs the line a bit, when you look at like what an independent educational evaluation is. It is completed by somebody not employed by the district.
Right.
Now, it doesn't specify W-2 employee versus 1099 employee, but I do think it gets a little dicey there.
Yeah.
So I ended up splitting the two businesses. So at one point it was I split the two businesses and I ran both, and then it got to the point where I was like, okay, I really need to step away from the district contract business and handed that off to somebody else, and then focused 100% on my private practice. So
did you sell that business?
yes, to somebody else who now runs it.
Yeah. So
Now
that was
I still have some connection to it, but I still obviously still friends with the person and we talk, and like I still have some connection to the business, but I don't do. I've completely stepped away from it.
So that was the non-public agency.
Yeah. So we had a non-public agency that, and then yeah, so ended up stepping away from that in order to focus on the private practice. And on the flip side of that too, we also started to get like I'd have parents who I'd maintain communication with, and they say, wow, James, you did great. And I'm part of this Facebook group, and I'm like, oh, you should go. James, he's going to do a fantastic assessment, and he's not, he's unbiased. He's going to, say it as it is. And then parents would message back to the parent, for example, and say, well, I heard he works really closely with school districts. And so from a business perspective too, I think there was some conflicting interests trying to do that. But from a business perspective too, I found that it was a lot cleaner to say like, hey, here's the clients that we, here's how we present our business, and it's not, trying to do too many different things at once that people might view as conflicting with one another.
People ask, do you have to have a non-public agency to contract with schools? And the answer is no, obviously. But what did, though, like having the non-public agency, what did it allow you to do if people are interested?
Yeah, I think there are some benefits to it. I mean, one of the clear benefit is if you want to provide any other related services, psycho assessments aren't considered related service, right? But if you want to provide related services, if you want to provide counseling services, if you want to expand to speech or OT or doing other things, you absolutely need it. I also think it's we talked about being a clinical psych is sort of helpful when you're sort of facing the public. I think having a non-public agency can be helpful when you're facing districts. It's shown that you've gone through a certain degree of vetting to be approved as a non-public agency, and then getting contracts with like SELPAs and consortiums to get those master contracts. So now you don't just have a contract with an individual school district, but maybe if it's a multi-district SELPA, you can get a contract with the SELPA or even the larger consortium for the region. And usually, at least at the time, my understanding was having that non-public agency was a requirement of that. Now maybe it's to provide those other related services, but your name is then on the list of providers, and then the district doesn't have to go through the whole process of if you have a master contract with the SELPA, the contracting process with the district's a lot simpler too, because it's already established.
Right. Okay. So you kind of broke off, and this is another thing that people ask a lot about is, when you build a business, you actually want to build it in a way that you could potentially at some point sell it off, so like, did you find that however you built that business, like, did certain things matter in order for that business to be
sellable?
Sellable. Yeah. Where someone would want to take it over.
So the person who took it over worked closely with me in building it.
Okay.
So that was it wasn't, I don't know that it was a sellable business in any other way.
Okay.
It
Got
was
it.
and I think it kind of gets to a larger point too, like around, what your aims are as an LEP. Because I don't know, Jenna, maybe you did. I didn't go to school for business. And then suddenly you're a business person,
Yeah.
right? Now I do have ambitions of like, okay, how do I, my current practice, like how do I build a practice that is then sellable to somebody who, isn't working in it with me, right? And then I think there's a lot more considerations. You have to have you basically have to have an infrastructure that runs itself so that you can step away from it and it's still generating money.
Right.
Like I think it can't be all you, right? Because then you leave and then there's no business.
Right.
So certainly my goal with the Bylund clinic, not anytime soon. I mean, I'm 44 years old. I'm going to be working for a while. But I do have dreams of like, okay, in 20 years from now, like, is this something that somebody would like want to acquire?
Yeah.
And so I spend a lot more time now with the Bylund Clinic thinking about how to make it an actual business, and not just, me running around trying to do a bunch of stuff and, calling it a business.
Yeah. I have found that it requires so much of me, the business side of it.
It
And
is.
I'm trying to hire the right people to help me run the business.
Yeah.
So far, I am still way more involved in the day-to-day business operations than I want to be. And I'm trying. And then when you go to put your psychologist hat on, it's harder.
It's
Not
super hard. Oh no,
that,
for sure. Like my brain is just the more like I add business stuff to it, the more psychology stuff I lose.
yeah,
Like, oh my God, I can't manage all this. This is
yeah.
crazy. But
It's really tough.
and it's a tough balancing act too. I mean, when people think about like, oh, I want to have a group practice, really sit with that, because I mean, it is, and then you're bringing on a lot more people, which means your overhead is going way up, and now suddenly I'm having to make way more. Now our business, if I look at the top line, we generate a lot of money,
Hmm.
but when I look at the bottom line, I'm like, there's a lot of expenses in there. And I keep trying to get to the point. I keep thinking like, okay, this is the year. This is the year where like I don't have to show up to work today. And now I work less than I used to, but I still have to show up to work.
Yeah.
Like I still manage a caseload.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to step away from it completely,
Yeah.
So it's tough, and then, you know, and I think too, like if people were thinking about going out and using their LEP, depending on how much time you want to invest in trying to run a business, I would also consider going to work with somebody who has an established practice. To be honest with you, I mean, I look around at the people that work for me and I'm envious. They
Oh
they
my God. Yeah.
they're all happy. I don't think I'm like,
Yeah.
and I say it somewhat like jokingly, right? But you can show up, you can do the work that you want to do, right? Which is help kids and
Right.
work with families. You come to a nice office, you get a nice paycheck, and you don't have to worry about any of the marketing. You don't have to worry about any of the scheduling. You don't have to worry about, all the overhead of test kits and the insurance requirements these days are bizarre. Having the office space, like I deal with all the headaches, and you can just show up and do your job and really make pretty good money and have extremely flexible hours.
Yep. I say that all the time. I mentor a lot of people through Empower LEP, and they're asking me, all these things about running their own practice. And I'm like, you really should consider going and working for somebody else. And
Yeah,
some people are into it. Some people think, oh, I'm not gonna, I deserve more money than that, or
yeah,
like, oh,
sure.
they're not paying me enough.
Yeah,
And then some people are like, well, I ultimately want to go do my own practice. So people don't want me to come into their practice because they are looking for people who want to stay with them long term. And that's understandable too. I mean, I don't want to take on anyone in my practice who's
yeah,
thinking about, like, oh, I just want to stay here for a little bit and then leave.
yeah, the balance.
But everybody, it is, first of all, I'm so thankful that that's what I did first
Yeah,
for so many reasons. One, because of the business side of it, because I didn't have to deal with that for almost 7 years, right? While I just came in, I gave them my hours, they booked
yeah,
me, I showed up, I did the
yeah,
work I wanted to do, I made the money, I didn't have to deal with taking money from them or any of the headaches, and I had the backing of a clinic where I felt safer than being on my own.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, there's
also,
benefits for sure.
also having people to talk about clinical cases with too,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
We
it's a
have weekly
different
meetings, which is
beast.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that we started doing a year ago that, I mean, I learned a lot from it. Like I'm sitting here and the people that are working for me are sharing this, know way more about certain topics than I do, and we're able to, collaborate on a lot of aspects of the business. So like not just, discussing cases, but, how do we, tweak our report template, to make it efficient, but also make it more, effective in communicating the results and make it more user friendly and, discussing, marketing and, operating procedures and, what's working and what's not working. And we can troubleshoot and solve those problems. And it's, there's definitely some benefits to being a part of a group practice.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So let's go back to you have stepped away and you've started building the Bylund Clinic, and you go from it being, did you already have people working with you at the time? And just kind of how did your process go with like taking on new employees and
Yeah.
also expanding to your different areas?
Yeah, I mean, I've been super lucky. I mean, I have to look back and I'm like, okay, like when I started my private practice, the SELPA director I worked with at the time, who's moved to Michigan a long time ago, helped promote my business within like the contract of SELPA. I mean, I've gotten really lucky in hiring just amazing people.
Yeah.
When I started out, all of the people that we had, like when it was a combination, when it was the non-public agency, it was all people I knew. So people I worked with in districts before.
Right.
I was a university instructor, so people I taught in my classes would come on and work for us. So it was a pretty easy like vetting process because I already knew who these people were,
Right.
So it definitely started out that way. Then when we separated the two businesses and I stepped away from the non-public agency, we did have an agreement that like you had to go one way or the other. Like you couldn't do work for that agency, and because we felt like it would just, you're pulling away from one business to do the other. So most people went with the non-public agency because that's the work that they did, was working in schools.
Yeah.
I had two people that came over with me to the Bylund Clinic just to help with testing because they weren't interested in working in schools. They liked coming to an office. They didn't, they weren't interested in, going to a different school site every day and managing all the complexities of that. So we did that. One person primarily helped me with testing. They didn't do full assessments. And then the other person did full assessments. I would say it got to the point where I was just losing my mind trying to keep up with the evaluations. That like we started to get a number of referrals that we couldn't keep up with. So I was like, okay, we really need to hire somebody on. I was always really cautious about it because I didn't want to like overpromise and underdeliver. I didn't want to say, oh, come work with us and you're going to get X number of cases a month and then not be able to provide that.
Right.
I didn't want to have to pull away from other people's assessments. So it always feels and still feels like a delicate balancing act. Like right now we're at a point because our 4 assessors are all booked out 3 months. So now I'm like, okay, we need somebody else. Like I can't tell people they have to wait that long for an assessment. So like right now, like we're hiring somebody, I mean, we don't have somebody, like I would like to hire somebody.
Yeah.
So
right.
so I'm always trying to, yeah, I'm always trying to balance those things out, right? But when we get to the point where I was like, okay, I put an ad on EdJoin, and the first person who replied was somebody who I'd worked with in the past. Like I knew them working in district. I knew them working at the university. I hired them on the university when I was the like lead person there. And so I knew them and they applied right away. I'm like, you got the job, and then we got another really just fantastic candidate right out the gate too. And she's been amazing. Like she's a major contributor to like our growth over the last year, so I got really lucky on some hires there. Since then we've like I said, we've hired our office manager. I used to have like a virtual office manager who was great for a time, but then it got to the point like it was too much for them. And then another like word of mouth referral, somebody who worked for a school serving kids with disabilities a few years ago, wanted to kind of step back into it, but had a lot of experience like as the office manager there. So I was like, okay, great fit. And then they brought over an ed therapist that had also worked at that school but was looking to leave. So a lot of just word of mouth has been really helpful. But like right now we're hiring like an associate therapist, and we're we're posting on Indeed. We're running interviews. We haven't we've interviewed people that we haven't hired.
Yeah.
For all of the various positions that we've had. But now it's gotten beyond just like my network, which now it's a little bit more complicated in terms of bringing somebody on that like you don't run a background check, conduct an interview, check references. And we've had some people that started and quickly stopped because we realized that they weren't going to be a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't even think about posting on EdJoin for psychologists.
Oh,
Or
it's not a bad spot, but EdJoin, you've got to ride the wave. Like time to post it for EdJoin is like February, March. Like
right.
everybody working in schools is surfing EdJoin, like dreaming about leaving their current position. So like
Right.
that's the time to post on EdJoin. Like we posted one over the summer, and I think it just might be too late. But yeah, and EdJoin's not bad. Like Indeed can add up quickly. EdJoin's like 200 something bucks for like 2 months or something.
Okay.
It's not, the cost isn't that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think, so a lot of your business is IEEs. So in order for a school psych or LEP to be able to do assessments with you, they would need to be available during the school day. So it's harder.
Yeah, I say like the ideal, like for ours, and this is, I say ideal because it actually is the profile of everybody that like works there, including myself, right? Is you've got, you're a parent and a professional, you've got young kids, and you want to be able to make what you're making in the district or more, but doing it in half the time and picking your hours. Yeah.
Right.
And like, so if somebody wants to leave the district, it's a great job because you can work a couple of days a week and come test twice a week in the office, write your reports at home in the evening time, work around, your kids and family schedule. That's what it's really ideal for. And then again, you can make more than you make in the district and work half the time. So now if somebody's working full time in the district, that does get tricky. You can do testing on the weekends, and we do have people that do some testing on the weekends. All the IEP meetings that we attend now are virtual. Like I used to be like driving all over the Bay Area. Oh my God, when I look back at that, I'm like the time that I spent driving to IEP meetings was crazy.
Yep.
So the fact that it's all virtual is helpful. But say if you need to, pull away from work to do the meeting, or the trickiest part is if you have to take time off to go observe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that does get harder. It's certainly possible, but it is more difficult if you're full-time in the district.
Yeah, I have a couple people who are full-time in a district, and if they do an IEE, the IEEs are not the biggest part of my practice. We do a lot of more private assessments, but we do some IEEs, and if I have one of them do an IEE, I will just go do the observation for them.
Yeah, we split it up sometimes too, and like depending on where it is, like we have one psychologist who doesn't work in district, but because of childcare, only tests in the evenings and weekends, and doing observations are really difficult. So we'll split it up sometimes and have somebody else go do the observation. And I mean, I don't know what your perspective is on observations. A lot of cases, I think they're absolutely not necessary. I don't think there's I don't need to go to class to observe a reading disability. Like I can read with them, I don't need to sit in a class and watch them stare at the board, for 30 minutes. Sometimes districts push back and go, oh, well, you didn't do an observation, but the regulations don't say anything about the IE provider having to do an observation. It says there has to be an observation completed. Now, if the district did an assessment, they should have done an observation. So an observation was completed. So
Interesting.
Districts, it just kind of depends on how you read the regulations, I guess. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to do it, but we do try to avoid them unless we feel they're clinically indicated. I'm not just going to do an observation just to do an observation.
That is really interesting. I always feel like they definitely want us to do an observation, but that's interesting, your interpretation of the regulations.
I don't see anywhere where it says an IE provider has to do it specifically, but.
Well, it just seems like the IEE process in general is really nebulous. Like, I don't know even, I mean, we have sometimes directors will even try to direct the recommendations that we
Oh, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
give.
No, it's crazy. Well, the districts, I mean, I have to laugh at these people sometimes. I'm sorry. Like they just don't get it. It's like I want to make you get this additional $7,500 a year insurance policy on top of your existing professional liability and business policy. I want, you have to go and do this observation that's not necessary. It's like, why do you think the rates are going up? Like I have to raise my rate to cover the costs of all the requirements that you're placing on us, and I think our rate's still extremely competitive because it shouldn't be through the roof to do an assessment,
Right.
but it's, and then you talk about the district directors trying to, I mean, I've had district directors say, you need to CC me on every email that you send to a teacher. I'm like, do you do that for all your psychologists? You must have a really full inbox. Like it's just,
Right.
and then if you have that dual relationship with the district where you're doing the district assessments and then you're doing the IEE, I think you're more likely to end up in a position where the district uh, director or somebody's trying to guide your conclusions and recommendations. I mean,
Right.
and it shouldn't be that way. You should be able to be, and that's why I think the in the regulations it states that an IE provider cannot be employed by the district because it creates that conflict of interest.
Right. Right. Yeah. We wouldn't do that. We do some district work. We do some supervision work for districts, and for their psychologists, but we don't take IEEs for those districts because I feel
Yeah.
like it'd be a conflict.
Yeah, I think you need to. I mean, that's my personal belief. Now, that's not to
Yeah.
say like there's lots of people out there doing it. I did it for years, I'm not, definitely not
Right.
like
Right.
knocking. I'm just saying these are things to be aware of,
Yeah.
especially if things get increasingly contentious
Yeah.
between families and districts. You need to be, if you do that, I think you just need to be really careful in terms of what types of IE cases you take on.
Right. Right.
Although parents are certainly trying to vet their assessors these days too.
Yeah.
So if they ask you if you work with the district, just be very open and honest because you probably don't want that case in it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. So tell me more about the Bylund Clinic and kind of what are your goals for your clinic over the next couple of years. And I think you have some personal things that you're thinking about doing, how, like, where are your interests and, how
Yeah.
all those things.
Uh, I mean, my goal is honestly over the next 3 to 5 years and it may be sooner than that, but I really do want to get to the place where I don't have to do evaluations. And I think there's two like big pieces to that. Part of it is I make enough off the Bylund Clinic that I don't financially have to do assessments. The other part of it is just building up a brand of the clinic that when people come to us, they're coming to the clinic and not to me.
Right.
Because that's another thing we run into a lot is people are coming because they want me to do an assessment. And that's, when you're trying to run a group practice, to be able to have a uniform enough product that people are coming to us, and it doesn't matter if it's me or not,
Right.
is going to be another important part of that. And part of the reason why I want to do that is there's just other things I want to be able to explore and do. Like our mutual friend and I started a nonprofit. Like along the way, started a nonprofit. Really to help families and school districts and sort of navigate through the challenges of excessive recreational screen use. And that was something I got really excited about for a couple of years. But because of my time and Michael's time, there's not enough bandwidth to do stuff like that. I started another nonprofit because I know it's hard for families to access services, and there's a lot of complexities of taking insurance. It really drives down your rate like tremendously, and you can't have like two tiered systems. You can't have a system for people who could take insurance and people who you pay cash for. They really do regulate it pretty tightly. But I started a nonprofit with the goal of taking insurance and offering all these services at a lower cost. And I got that off the ground, and then it stalled too because I just never had time to do it. So I think there's just other things that I would like to be able to spend my time doing. As my kids get older, I mean, I've cut back a lot of work just because there's so many family things to participate in that 10 years ago I worked 80 hours a week. Like I couldn't maintain that. So definitely getting to the point where I can step back and have a more high level management role in the clinic without having to be showing up to work every day to do the assessments. So that's definitely a goal. So I can do some of those other things. Something I mean similar. I know you've done a lot of work in this space, but being able to provide like more mentorship to people. I mean, I think I think a lot of people out there running their private practices have a lot to learn just about how to market their services. I had, two pieces of advice I got early on that were really helpful. Is one mentor said, like, hey, James, if you want to have a private practice, give yourself 5 years to build it, it was pretty dead on, to like where like I could walk away from the school district was about 5 years,
Yeah.
So, and then the other one was you have to be able to, stop thinking like a psychologist and start thinking like a business person. Now, we talked earlier, it's hard to manage both of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a growing interest of mine in trying to grow the group practice has just been around like how do you market a business? Like how do you grow a business? And
Yeah.
none of us went to school to do that. We
Right.
went to school to learn how to give the whisk,
Yeah, it is such a different beast. And I mean, I was the kind of person who, when I was in college and all of my friends were econ majors, I didn't really even understand what that was. As
No,
a psychology
yeah,
major, I'm like, what is econ? As
yeah,
an 18, 19-year-old kid.
yeah,
And now I'm like, wow, I'm really learning a whole new skill. I learn something new every day. I'm doing something different every day. None of this was in my skill set 5 years ago.
no, oh no, none of it. Well, and I mean, I think we got out. I imagine, hopefully, right? We all got into this to help kids, right?
Right.
And that's what we learned how to do, is to be able to help kids. And and I think when we think about who our client is, we should be thinking about the kids and how to be child focused and student focused and be able to help them. But when it comes to running a business, the kid's not our client. So you have to figure out who your client is because the kid's not calling you
Right.
asking for an assessment.
Right.
Like so who's the client that you're marketing to, and then what's the most effective way to market to them? I think one of the things I did early on was just, let me tell you everything. Let me vomit all this information on top of you in terms of who I am, right? Why am I the best person to pick the job, right? But, really you have to think about who your client is and what's the problem that they're facing, and
Right.
how do you align yourself with their experience and how do you empathize with it? And then how do you, position yourself as an expert who has a very simple solution to solve their problem?
Exactly.
It's not about us, it's about them, and so, and I think going back to the piece around like district, is your client the district or is your client the parent? Because they have very different problems to solve.
Right.
The district's problem is to be able to stay in compliance, and meet a timeline with a reasonably legally defensible assessment. The parent's problem is if they're struggling at home on how to help their kid, and then so then your marketing looks a whole lot different.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
What kinds of what parts of the practice have you gotten help in learning how to do or put a piece of it in somebody else's hands?
Uh, yeah. So one of the first things that was really critical was just getting admin support. I have very possibly like the worst executive functioning skills of anybody I know. And so like me managing a practice is like the dumbest thing ever. So like, so I needed to make sure somebody answered the phones and got people scheduled. So that was number one. And since then, that person's taken on a whole lot of other roles,
Mhm.
but admin support was probably number one. Then, I was very lucky to hire somebody who had a lot of just operational experience, so like how to like set up business operations.
Mhm.
So that was hugely helpful,
Huge.
so because we talked about like building a practice that you could walk away from,
Right.
like if you don't have like really solid operating procedures, I mean, it used to be, and I imagine most LEPs probably feel like this, it's just me trying to do everything, right?
Right.
Like I'm a marketer, I'm a website designer, I'm an office manager, I'm a scheduler, like I'm like doing all of these things. And it's just one, it's impossible to be able to have the knowledge to do all of those things and then the bandwidth to do it.
Yep.
So really think about like what are the things that I want to be able to focus on, and then what are all the other parts of the business that need to be done, and then how can I outsource that? So somebody who does website and marketing, like hire somebody who does website and marketing. Somebody who does the operational stuff, somebody who does all of the front client facing office stuff. So finding people to fill those positions as the business grows has been really important. But like I said, I mean, it also the amount of money I spend between the first and the 10th of the month is insane. Like just to cover the cost of all that. It's a
Yeah.
lot. But so far, I mean, I do think it's worth it. I mean, the amount of time I've been able to get with my family because of, building a private practice has been life-changing, but it is a lot. And you do get to the point where you really do have to outsource stuff and really spend your time doing the things that you're good at, like you could spend, months trying to figure out how to make your website work correctly, or you could spend a little bit of money up front to have somebody design you a really beautiful website.
Right.
And then like you could design a nice website, go on Squarespace, but you don't know anything about the back end of a website. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the background that are pulling people towards your website that if you don't have that built in, no one will ever find you online.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I mean, there's so many things that you're just going to have to like. So I said admin support was the first. That's not true. Like website and marketing, like outsourcing for that. That was actually the first thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There are so many things. And just like you said, like the business can grow and you're like, whoa, like the business is making so much money, but like the amount of money that I'm actually making is going down.
Oh, yeah. I've thought about it. I've thought, am I better? I mean, I think I had this conversation with myself this morning. Like what if I just got rid of all these offices and like I just, so I mean, I have that conversation with myself all the time.
Yeah.
But I think at this point my goal is to build a practice that makes money when I'm not working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is my goal at this point. But
yeah.
But if it all crashes and burns, that I still can open up a single office space and do assessments.
Right. And do it all yourself again. Yeah. That's the thing. It's like do you want to shift from? It's like the bigger things get, the more you have to think like, do I want to shift from doing the work that I thought I was going into practice to do, or doing the business and having other people doing the work? It's very interesting because people don't necessarily realize that, right? Like the bigger the business grows, the more you're not doing the work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what do you want to spend your time doing? So you asked me like 3 to 5 years, what do I want to spend my time doing? I like the idea of managing a business. What is my interest? Like it's shifted, right? Like I got into this really excited about neuropsychology, like really excited about it, like, reading original texts and, neuropsychology. And then now it has kind of shifted. Like now I really am like, what gets me excited to talk about is not a dyslexia assessment. It's how to grow a business. Now that's what excites me. So 3 to 5 years, I would love to be able to be in a position where I've got multiple businesses and I'm running them and they're successful and not necessarily be sitting in IEP meetings anymore. But one quick way to burn you out in this profession is to do a lot of IEEs.
Right. Yeah.
They take their toll.
Yeah, we don't advertise profusely on the IEE front. We do them, but we always hope we're going to get more just direct.
Oh yeah, those are easy. Yeah.
Okay, so if there is, one piece of guidance you would give yourself back when you started, what do you think it would be?
Well, I mean, I honestly, I think that the guy it was actually my clinical supervisor for San Diego Unified, and he was a funny guy, but when he said like think like a business person, don't just think like a psychologist, because he elaborated on it somewhat. I mean, he's basically saying like you could be the best psychologist in the world, but if you don't have clients, you're not helping anybody, right? Because it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, it matters how good of a psychologist you are. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, right? But if you're going to run a private practice, you don't have clients unless you're also a business person, right? And I think the advice I would offer myself would really just be around that theme, but hey, James, it actually is worth it to spend a little bit of money to get that person to develop a professional website that has search engine optimization, and if you want to do Google ads, they can actually optimize your Google ads, right, rather than you trying to figure out how to do all those things yourself. Like that wasn't a good use of my time. If I don't know if it was available at the time, but certainly, you can get a virtual assistant that's going to schedule all of your appointments and things like that for you. Like spend a little bit of money up front, because then you can spend more time doing the things that you're good at, and ultimately make more money, right? Like, think whatever your hourly rate is for an IEE, you're paying yourself that to develop that website. And the person you're hiring to do the website is charging you a fifth of that.
Right.
So I think really sort of getting that business hat on would be, and part of that too, then of course is, the whole messaging and marketing piece, because that influences your website. It influences, how how you, communicate your services to everybody that you interact with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love what you were saying about how it's really not about you and how great you are on the website. It's about communicating that, like, the hero is really the parent.
Yeah.
And
right.
we are the expert to help solve their problem.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is really a shift, right? Like it's really a shift in thinking, and it does change how you communicate, what you do.
Yeah.
And it changes the conversations you have with parents too, or if the parent is your client, right? Like, or if the district's your client, it does shape, how you market yourself and, share what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think also, and I just went through a course with some people who are thinking about or in the process of making the transition from public school work into private practice. And we went through all these different business foundations with experts in those fields to help us better understand that. And as we were going through, I was thinking, like, I don't know if we're motivating these people or if they're going to run for the hills.
Yeah.
But that was really the point, was to say, look, this is not, you're not messing around here. If you're really thinking about starting a business, it's a really serious thing. It takes a lot of time, a lot of you, a lot of your everything, your finances, your energy, your mindset. And it takes you away from the work of a school psychologist, or the work. So it is definitely a big shift. And sometimes people realize, you know what, I don't really want to do all that stuff. But just because they don't want to run their own business doesn't mean that they can't work in private practice. There are so many ways you can still work in private practice. And I encourage that highly. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I think, we talked about it earlier too, but I mean, if you can find a solid group practice to join, you can experience a lot of the benefits that you're seeking. The flexibility, the pay, the being able to be child focused again, like all those things that you want to experience with private practice without all of the headaches.
Exactly. So if people want to get a hold of you, where do they find you?
Well, our website, I guess, www.thebylundclinic.com. Is probably the most straightforward way, because you can submit through the website, or just got our phone number and things like that they can contact us at. Not like a big social media guy. Trying to get back into that that's another. It's just like, how do you now you're you can spend your entire day on Instagram. I mean, it's it's crazy. So we do have an Instagram. I think it's the Bylund Clinic. We do have a Facebook that somebody posts some stuff on there for me. So it's and we're on LinkedIn, and we're on all those places. But I would like to be more active on there, but probably the best way to get a hold of me is probably just through the website.
Okay. Yeah. And if people are thinking, oh, maybe the Bylund Clinic is a place where I might like to work, then they can reach out to you.
Oh my God, that would be wonderful. If you're looking to, I mean, like I said, we're looking to hire an associate level therapist right now. But obviously this podcast is geared towards LEPs, and we're definitely looking to bring somebody on. We keep reaching our number. We set goals for the number of assessments we're trying to complete each month, and we keep hitting and surpassing those. And we're really at a point where if somebody wants to come on and pick up anywhere between even 3 and 5 assessments a month, even they can come on and we do pay pretty well. I think it's a good place to work. No one's leaving. That's always a good sign. Like people seem to want to stay. So
awesome.
So if anybody's interested in that and they live in the East Bay area, contact us.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was a really invigorating conversation. I enjoyed learning all about your practice, Dr. Bylund.
Yeah. Thanks for allowing me to come on and talk with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for listening to the Empower LEP podcast. Episodes can be found at empowerlep.com. If you liked what you heard, please leave a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to connect. I would love to learn more. I can be found at jana@empowerlep.com.